Oh my god. Oh my god. That's so insane. Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my weapon build guide for the King's Guard Lance. Now, this is probably going to be a little bit of a more in-depth video because this weapon functions very strangely. There's a lot of like weird synergies and interactions that work on this weapon that just don't work on like any other weapon. And so in this video, we're going to be breaking down everything that you need to know. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So to start us off, the King's Guard Lance comes with a unique ability, Guardian. Aiming activates preview mode. When canceling the aim, deactivate preview mode. When firing while aiming, deploy up to 3 Guardian Lances on the terrain and consume a set amount of ammo upon deployment. The deployed Guardian Lances last for a set amount of time, and Guardian Lance deals damage periodically to nearby enemies. Each time the deployed Guardian Lance is hit, its duration and range are slightly increased. So we're able to put down these like Guardian Lance turrets, and this is definitely a weapon that you are going to want to get ranks on. The like amount of quality of life that this thing gets from plus ranks is fantastic, mainly because while you're not increasing the damage that it does, you are going to be increasing the max duration of the turrets. You're going to be increasing the damage range and the damage range upon hit and the maximum damage range. Basically, all the things that you would want out of this thing, you're going to get improvements in its stats while you're leveling it up. And so it's not all that great with a level 0, just because, you know, you're not going to able to get the circle that big. But once you get it a 4 out of 4, the circle turns massive and you can cover a huge amount of radius with this thing. Now that we've done a little brief overview, now we need to talk about how to scale this thing's damage. And the biggest concept to understand to get the most out of this weapon is the fact that the turrets snapshot, meaning that whatever damage buffs you have, for the most part, this isn't like 100% everything, but whatever damage buffs you have, when you put a turret down, the turret will maintain for its duration. So keeping the turrets up are really important. And they take all of your damage buffs at the time of casting them. So I'm just going to go show you like a quick little demonstration. So for example, right now I have 0 mods on our King's Guard Lance. If we place one down, you'll see that it's hitting for 2,919 is the high on our crit. 1,117 is like our kind of like base hit damage on this thing right now. So we're going to swap off so that the numbers hopefully go away. All right, now what we're going to do is we are on Sharon. I've got Overcharged Edge, which gives us ambush damage. This gives us a 150% damage increase. Now I'm going to go stealth and place my turret down, and you'll see that that turret just snapshotted all of that damage increase. And so even though ambush is only for 1 shot, the turret, as long as I keep its duration buffed, will snapshot all of that damage and stay buffed as long as I keep it up. And the more ranks of the King's Guard Lance that I have, the easier it is to keep up the duration. Because remember, the max duration and the duration per shot all increase, so it becomes super easy to maintain this thing with a 100% buff. And I could then like put down another one, and now I can maintain this one. And now I've basically just given this thing like 150% more damage. The next thing to understand about this weapon is that the laser turrets fire as fast as the gun fires. So increasing your fire rate on this weapon is one of the best ways to increase its damage. And while this weapon doesn't do any big number hits, it hits very quickly, meaning that this weapon, even though it only has a like 5% attribute status effect trigger rate, is incredibly good at proccing statuses, especially statuses that stack. Now, in my opinion, there's like 3 different elements that you could build for this thing. The first and kind of the most obvious, because it comes with a cerulean slot, is for cold damage. And I was thinking originally that cold would be like my favorite, because cold would allow us to chill enemies. And, you know, if we are proccing our chill and freezing things, then they're going to stay in the circle and then they will be stuck in the damage for longer. But I found that chill is not my favorite. And the main reason that I'm not favoring chill the most over of its elements is because simply this weapon we're able to make it deal enough damage that enemies will die fast enough in its circles that chill is not required. And then the other two elements that are really interesting for this thing are fire and toxic. Now, I personally went for toxic on mine, and I'll talk about why. Toxic and fire are able to stack. And so if I put my lance down now versus the chill, you were seeing only one stack of chill. They're getting chilled. With toxic, you'll see that these guys are getting 5 stacks of poison or toxic damage on them, which is really hard to do on just about any weapon. The really only way to stack up a bunch of stacks of poison on something is with Freyna, and this thing is very good at stacking tons of dot ticks on enemies. And because this weapon hits for little numbers, one of the best ways to add some extra damage to it is by adding flat damage, because we're getting that flat damage fairly often. And so adding elements and going an elemental route for this weapon is very helpful. And so I personally went toxic. You could absolutely go fire on this thing. Fire works the same. It stacks up. An element that I wouldn't recommend on this thing is electricity. The only reason for that is because with electric, it's either on or it's not. You can't like continuously strip defenses with electric. It's kind of like, are they electrocuted or not? Versus toxic and fire, you can stack multiple stacks of and get some extra damage from. Now, I quickly want to go over the best Descendants to use this gun with and some synergies, because there's actually a surprising amount of Descendants that are really good with this. Obviously, Sharon is fantastic with this because she can buff up its damage by 150%, and she could just put down 3 turrets with 150% increased damage, and keep them up at all times. So Sharon likes this thing a lot, but there are a lot of other characters that like this. As you can see, like, it's ticking for 25,000, 26,000 damage on Sharon. So Sharon is like the character that makes it deal the most damage that I've found, but there's a lot of other interesting choices. Other character synergies that work well with this are Enzo with his supply firearm enhancer. Once again, we talked about this weapon snapshotting buffs. So you can place your 3 turrets down with your supply firearm enhancer, and then you never need to use your one ability again. Even after you reload, your turrets maintain or have snapshotted your crit buffs, so you can just keep them maintained at all times, and you do not need to recast your one ability to get that crit back. So Enzo works out really well. Another interesting synergy with it is because it ticks so quickly, you can use it with Focus Fire. Focus Fire on Enzo means that you basically get duration increase on firearm critical hit. You get 0.4 seconds of your skill duration if you crit. The turrets practice, so you can have an infinite 4 on Enzo, which is disgusting because it will constantly give you more ammo. And so it's a little bit less damage than using Start Supply, but you are just like an ammo bot for your entire team if you're playing around with this thing, which is pretty ridiculous. Very cool synergy there. And other characters that like this are Haley. Haley has a 3 ability, which will give this thing a ridiculous amount of crit chance, which is fantastic. Blair can also give this a lot of crit chance with his like backdraft mods, and a lot more firearm damage. Valby likes this thing with supply fire, or with supply moisture. She can give it a lot of crit chance. Jaber obviously kind of does the same thing as this turret, and this weapon kind of makes him redundant, honestly. Like, it's just a better version of Jaber. But obviously, if you want to put down turrets and have even more AoE coverage, you can use this with Jaber if you'd like, and have like a turret fantasy with like a bunch of turrets up all at the same time. And lastly, you can use it on Freyna as a way to just have another massive upkeep source of poison for your 4th ability. If you go that poison route, Freyna directly scales some of her damage off of the amount of enemies that are poisoned or toxic, and you're able to basically keep that up 100% of the time with this weapon. Now let's go over builds, and I've got a few different kind of builds for the Kingsguard Lance that I want to talk about, and like why each build is set up the way that it is. And the first build that I have is my lethal poison build that's combining poison toxic enhancement with the mod lethal finish. That is very weird, but very good on this thing. Lethal finish reads when firing a firearm, ammo with an additional plus 60% critical hit rate is fired. When defeating an enemy with enhanced bullets, module cooldown is reduced by 12.4 seconds. However, this firearm's base weak point damage is fixed at 100%. The turrets cannot weak point. They do not deal weak point damage, buffing weak point is useless on them. And so this getting 100% weak point is not at all an issue to us. However, what this allows us to do is get this weapon to crit like crazy. This weapon has a really bad crit chance. We're at 15% right now. It's very good to scale crit damage because you can't scale weak point. There's only so many things that you can do to scale its damage. But lethal finish allows us to do some pretty wacky things with this that I want to show you. So we're going to put down a turret, and you'll see that it is not critting very much. You'll see that this is our like 15% crit chance. And then if we keep firing, all of a sudden, now it's just critting. And lethal works like weirdly well. It's not actually going to display the weapon's crit chance like here. It won't tell us that it's gotten basically 60% flat crit hit rate. But this allows us to make this weapon basically crit all the time on a non-crit Descendant because that's 60% flat. And as you can see, it's not going anywhere. We're able to basically maintain this. Now, from my testing, it is a little bit tricky to try to get this buff on multiple turrets. I'll see if we can get lucky here. Looks like this one is not getting the crit at the moment. But that mod allows us to get turrets up at 100% crit chance, which is pretty, or close to 100% crit chance, which is very gross. And you're able to, there we go. Look at that. And I'm doing this on Eugen, by the way, so that you know that I'm not benefiting from any crit hit increases. You know, if I was doing this on Enzo or Haley, you know, you wouldn't really need this lethal mod because then, you know, they already have a bunch of crit hit increases. By the way, you'll notice this happen a bunch if you're testing the Kingsguard Lance. This isn't the damage being bugged. It's in, I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like that the damage is ticking faster than the servers can keep up with. So it's basically queuing the damage. So this is damage that I already dealt a while ago, but the game wasn't able to spit out that damage fast enough. So now it's trying to catch up to all of the damage that occurred. It is definitely very odd, but it is not like broken technically, or it's not like actually doing that damage. It's just leftover damage that the game wasn't able to like spit out fast enough when that damage was happening. So this is the main build that I've been using on the Kingsguard Lance. We're going to be using action and reaction and rifle reinforcement to get as much damage as possible. It is important to note that the turret does a percentage damage of your firearm damage. So firearm damage is one of the best ways to scale it. It only does like 14%, so it's not hitting nearly as hard as our actual gun, but it is scaling off of our firearm. Next, because we're going to be using lethal finish, we're going to want crit hit rate increases and then crit damage, concentration priority, and better concentration. We're also going to want fire rate up because the turrets scale off of our fire rate. I didn't recatalyze this C slot. You could if you wanted to. I actually really like increased magazine size, and the magazine size doesn't do anything for the actual turrets, but when you're constantly having to shoot at 3 turrets to keep them all up, being able to buff all of them in a single mag felt really good. I was testing without magazine size, and if I didn't have magazine size, I wasn't able to fill up all of the turrets, their duration, by shooting at them. I'd have to reload and then keep shooting. And so just being able to shoot them with 1 magazine, get them all to full duration, and then reload felt really satisfying and felt like much better. And then we're going to be using Toxic because Toxic is going to be a large source of our damage. It's going to stack up dots on enemies and also increase our hit damage. Lethal finish to make our crit damage crazy, or our crit chance it crazy. And then lastly, this is obviously like a total option for you. But one thing that I personally found with this weapon is it uses just an F ton of ammo. The turrets all cost large ammo to put down. You have to constantly shoot the turrets to keep them up. If you're playing on the move, you have to constantly place down more turrets. And so this is a conversion mod that basically anytime that we get general rounds, we're able to get 1 special rounds. And this led me to basically having 100% uptime on its ammo, which is just quality of life. If you wanted to go for another damage mod, I would go Insight Focus, probably for some more firearm critical hit rate and crit damage here. But I kind of like the like extra ammo for this thing. Next, we get to the Cold Lance build. If you want to use a like cold version of this thing, this is a cool setup. Basically, we swapped that mag size for chill enhancement, and then we're using Snowflake Conductor so that when we're attacking enemies, we're going to be stacking up percentage increased firearm damage. We still got that ammo mod, and then we just replaced Lethal Finish with our Insight Focus. You could, if you wanted to use cold with crit, you could absolutely do that and just replace this with Lethal Finish. The cool thing about Snowflake Conductor and Toxic Conductor and why I'm using these mods over Sweeping Squad, it's kind of a preference thing. But for example, I'll show you how this works real quick. But so we've now got Snowflake Conductor on, right? You'll see that when I put the damage down, hopefully we can get this recording. It was very brief, but you saw it go from 9,000 to 10,000 damage. If it drops Frostbite, it might drop down. But I said this weapon snapshots, and it seems to snapshot everything except for the like conductor mods. It'll actually basically self-buff itself. The turret will self-buff, and so there's very little management that we have to do in order to upkeep this damage buff. However, something like Sweeping Squad, which is at the end of the day hardly more damage. It is slightly more damage, but it's hardly more damage. It's like 4% more damage. Sweeping Squad, you need to kill 3 enemies, place down those turrets, and if you kill 3 enemies or if you place down the turrets and the turrets are killing enemies, they're proccing Sweeping Squad, but they're not actually benefiting from it. You have to recast the turrets to benefit from Sweeping Squad, and it just felt kind of like an annoying process to try to deal with for like 4% more damage, where our things just retroactively get this buff. And so that is very nice, and that's why we're using Snowflake Conductor over something like Sweeping Squad. And our last build is like the crit character build. If you are running on like Haley or Enzo or Valby, and you don't need Lethal Finish, you absolutely could still use Lethal Finish for a 100% critical hit rate. But if you don't need Lethal Finish because you're getting like 70% crit hit rate on like Haley, for example, then you can swap the lethal for something like Toxic Conductor. I prefer Toxic on this thing. And then we can add another crit hit rate mod. So I'll show you right now on Haley. So now on Haley, we already have like 77% firearm critical hit rate. So it's not as important to try to use a like lethal thing. So I just rock Toxic Conductor for 26% more damage, and then we can fit in a like crit mod to get even more crit hit chance and more crit damage. And so if you're going to use a crit character, this is the build that I would use. If you're wanting to use cold, I'd use the cold lance build. And if you're playing a character that doesn't buff crit rate, or you just want to see 100% crit rate lances, I would use the lethal poison build. Lastly, for substats on this thing, my substats are pretty scuffed. So I'm just going to list out what the like god roll substats would be. But you really want crit damage on this thing if you're going to be scaling it with crit characters and using the lethal thing. Crit damage is massive. I unfortunately do not have that. Getting a flat element is really nice to scale some extra damage on this thing. I would recommend either getting Toxic, Fire, or Chill as a flat element. And then if you get like Fire, build it for Fire. You would just build it the same way, just swap to Fire things rather than Toxic things. If you get Chill, you could go for like the Chill build. But I went for Gold Toxic. Firearm attack is very nice because obviously the weapon scales off of your firearm attack, so firearm attack is more damage for turrets. And then lastly, like something like rounds per mag is just kind of nice quality of life. My roll is perfect here, except I would change the bonus firearm attack for crit damage, and that would be kind of my god roll. And the very last thing is where to farm this. I would recommend 081 from the Muskeg Swamp outpost. The reason I do that is because the boss there is really easy. The like 90 boss is kind of a pain in the butt. So I farmed mine from the Muskeg Swamp 081 Mutant AA. For the synthetic fiber, I did the Hagios Dune base Vulgus strategic outpost. This one's pretty easy to do. And I'm pretty sure I was farming something else from here, so it just kind of had that overlap. For the nanotubes, I would recommend farming the 064 piece. I farmed a bunch of these because I wanted to get my Greg's Reverse Fate 4 out of 4, so you might already have some of these. These are from the outpost in Sterile Land. And lastly, for the blueprint, I'd recommend farming it from the 057s from Hard Executioner. You probably already have a bazillion of these if you were trying to farm Haley pieces or running Magister's Lab for XP. I'm sitting on 82 of them. And that is my recommendations for farming the Kingsguard Lance. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. The Kingsguard Lance is not the best weapon in the game, but it is the best at what it is meant to do, and that is basically replace Jaber and spawn kill ads as they're coming in. It is incredibly good at that, and while I don't think this is going to be like replacing the Thunder Cage for a run around mobbing gun, if you are doing a defense or a void fragment or where you know the enemies are spawning, there is simply nothing quite as good as this in terms of weapons. It's, you know, even as strong as like some of the stronger like spawn killing Descendants, such as like Vyasa. It's just really, really cool, and it's really good at doing the niche thing that it does. So yeah, guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.